Good morning, everybody. And thank you, Pablo, for the introduction. And also thank you, Sally, for giving us the sort of wider picture from the Activate Learning Group perspective. And in fact, in the things that I want to talk about this morning, I'm going to pick up a few of those themes. And thank you to all of you as well for having me to speak to you today as a guest speaker. It does feel a great honour and privilege to be standing up here in front of you. So I'm really grateful for that. I have to apologise for missing the team day back in July. I had hoped to come along to that, but I have watched all of the videos, so I do know who already has a purple pin. I'm afraid I'm not important enough to know who gets a purple pin today. Fingers crossed. But I did also pick up from the videos that my good friend and colleague Mike Jennings has set the bar for guest speakers incredibly high. So thanks for that, Mike. And I'm sure you'll all agree that his address, for those of you who were here, was absolutely fantastic, really brilliant around the values that really matter, I think, in business. So I've planned to speak to you for about 15 minutes today. That's what I've been asked to do. So I hope that's all right with everybody. And I want to cover just three main areas. I'd like to tell you just a little bit about myself and how I've come to the education sector. I'd also, and in fact to Activate Enterprise for that matter. And I'd also like just to touch on, well, as I'm sure many of you, or all of you, will have had the same email from Pablo about a week ago, last Monday, asking us to prepare a couple of short statements about what our role in Activate Enterprise involves. So I'd like to spend just a few minutes talking about that, and actually also about the role of the board of Activate Enterprise and how that fits in, because I think it's really important that we talk about that as well. So I'll just spend a few minutes talking about those. And finally, I'd like to spend just a few minutes touching again on the Activate Enterprise vision and the future, and actually, in particular, some of our great strengths and opportunities. So there are many of you here this morning who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, sort of personally before today. So I hope you won't mind me spending a couple of minutes just giving you a little bit of background about myself and about how what my involvement with Enterprise generally has been. I was born and brought up in Cape Town, South Africa, and my family returned here to England in 1989 when I was 14. We came here to Oxford. I say here to Oxford. We're in Banbury today. I live in Oxford. But we came here to Oxfordshire with literally nothing, apart from a suitcase of clothes. That was in 1989. Now, I'm not a Branson or a Dyson, and I'm certainly not a Sugar. And I haven't done it on my own, but I am, I suppose, a relatively successful businessman. In fact, I've been an entrepreneur for over 20 years, taking risks and doing things differently. And in that time, I've done well over £40 million worth of business in more than 20 countries, literally right across the globe. My primary business to date has been in financial services. I've built a medium-sized consulting firm based in the city, just near to the Gherkin, and also a financial modelling software company that operates out of Edinburgh. And all of my experience has really been in people and technology businesses, focusing in particular on progress and on excellence. And they're all cast in the mould of my very, very firmly held beliefs. And this is one of the first sort of parallel themes, I think, to what Sally has said to you this morning. That the organisations, the employers, the companies that are most relevant in this modern age, and in the age that will be relevant especially for our students at Activate Learning Group, those organisations are the ones that focus on people and on purpose and on promises. And the sort of outgoing guard of old-fashioned businesses, I think the ones which have tended to focus much more on sort of profit and process and platitudes. I think I mean, for me, that's quite a fundamental point, because I think we have to prepare the young people that we are working with day in, day out for that reality. We have to begin to think more like the employers that they're likely to be working for, and in particular the sort of businesses that they are likely to start. So that mindset, that mentality, really is coming through now. So I think it's a really fundamental thing to dwell on. I'm also involved in a number of charities and voluntary activities across Oxfordshire, and these have as their common centre of gravity my belief in the importance of bringing together business and education. So, about a year ago, I made a very profound personal choice to give up my day job in financial services and to bring my entrepreneurial and business building experience to the creation of social value in the education sector. But why the education sector? And why not, I don't know, open a restaurant or a hotel, or become, as many of my friends know, become a farmer or a tree surgeon. These are things that really, really interest me and things that I would love to learn more about and things that certainly at some point in my life I'm really looking forward to doing. Why the education sector? And I sort of dwelled on the question over the weekend, and I thought the answer for me is probably quite similar to the answer, I hope, for many of you, which is that it really boils down to the thing that I am most passionate about. And that, in turn, certainly for me, it feels as though it is driven by the experiences that I had as a young person. Being brought up in the height of apartheid in South Africa instilled in me a lifelong passion for equality, I suppose, social justice, and in particular educational opportunities for all. And there are countless stories that I could tell you from that sort of shocking and dangerous time in South Africa. And many of them would relate to education and, in fact, the lack of education for so many people, so many young people. And many would relate to the South African police force and the sheer brutality of the apartheid regime. But today, quite rightly, is an upbeat occasion. So I won't dwell on those. And in fact, instead, I'll pick up a theme of Sally's and go back to the 80s. So I thought, as he's one of my greatest inspirations, I thought I should tell you a story instead about my father. Now, in the mid-1980s, he was the general manager of an insurance company in Cape Town in South Africa. And as an employer, they spent vast amounts of money, this was the 80s, they spent vast amount of money on actually paying for young people, paying for bursaries for young people to do courses and qualifications that would prepare them for a career in the insurance sector. And as he got involved in this, he felt really very strongly that it was important that those cohorts of young people, that the way that bursary money was spent ought to tend towards proportionate representation of the races. And the problem was, as soon as he started sort of taking up the covers and beginning to look at this and see, well, how could he achieve this? He found very quickly that the numbers of black school leavers in South Africa at that time that had the required level of mathematics was so low that there was almost nothing that he could actually do to make more young black students eligible for these bursaries. So, not being one to give up, I think I know where I get it from, he decided to contact the mathematics teacher at one of the black schools in Cape Town. Now, of course, at this time, all of the schools in South Africa were segregated by race. So he decided to contact the mathematics teacher to have a conversation about, well, how can we change this? How can we make it not be the way it's always been? What might work? And I remember him coming home to the family that evening after he had had that meeting, and he'd been quite excited about it, that sort of sense of, we're going to change something. And I can remember him coming home and saying it was the only school that he had ever been to where the headmaster wore a pistol and holster for his own personal protection. And for me, I just find that deeply, deeply shocking. And I think it drives home some of the realities that were faced, in that time. So they decided between them, in fact, that the best way to create change, the best way to solve this particular problem, was to build a computer room in the school, and then to arrange a sort of a rota so that the staff from his office in the town would be able to come to the school on a regular basis and sort of inspire and teach both the students and the staff. Now, of course, the government and the Department for Education put all sorts of barriers and blocks in his way. They thought that they ought to have the money and that they knew how best to spend it. And of course, if that had happened, then the desired outcomes would not have come to pass. And in fact, it was illegal for my father to go to a black school, to visit a black school, because during apartheid, we had something called the Group Areas Act, which made it illegal for a white person to go into a black area without a permit. And they certainly weren't going to give him one of those. So he went without, and in fact, he had a number of close shaves with police roadblocks and so forth in the course of doing that. But he did always manage to make his way through when he needed to. And he got his way in the end. So he built a computer room at this school in a black township. And it was probably the first computer room, actually, ever to be built in a black school in South Africa at the time. And for those of you who know anything about computers, this was back in the day of Apple IIe's. So, it really was the very first personal computer back in the sort of mid-80s. So it was a really fantastic achievement. But unfortunately, in the meanwhile, the environment in South Africa had really degraded and got a lot worse. It was becoming quite a lot more dangerous. And as a result, he couldn't ask his own staff to go into that school and to take the same personal risks that he himself had taken. So his dream of having continued employer engagement in that particular school and for that particular purpose was never able to come to full fruition. And very sadly, about 2 months later, the maths teacher who had been trained in the use of the computers was sacked for expressing political views. And 2 weeks after that, the computer room was burnt down in another riot. But despite all of this, 2 years ago, my father received a call from a very, very successful GP based in America, completely out of the blue. And it turns out that this doctor was one of the students who had been inspired and whose life had been changed through what in the end was a very short-lived project. And really, for me, that just goes to show that no matter how difficult it is for us to measure student outcomes or to know which types of activities will achieve the results that we want, and no matter how difficult it is to sort of get a handle on student destinations and student success, we can rest assured in the role that we perform in this organisation, we can rest assured that we can change young people's lives for the better every single day. And really it's this that eventually drew me out of financial services and into the education sector. So that's a little bit about me and about where I'm coming from. Well, Pablo, you will be very pleased to hear that I have done my homework. And I have prepared a few sort of short statements, if you like, about the role of chairman of Activate Enterprise. And as I said earlier, also about the role of the board of directors of Activate Enterprise, which again I think is an important thing that we should cover. So I became a governor of OCVC. I've got to check the date because I'm getting old now. I became a governor of OCVC in 2011, as it was then known. And I was quite deeply involved with the creation and branding of Activate Learning and the creation of the wider Activate Learning group. And with all of these changes still bedding in, we realised it was critical also to create a new organisation for all of our work-based learning and training. So under new leadership and with an exciting vision and future, Activate Enterprise was born. And I was very honoured to be asked to be Activate Enterprise's inaugural chairman. And with the negotiations and company formation all successfully completed, my role as the chairman of Activate Enterprise then turns towards supporting Pablo and the senior management team in taking the organisation forward. And we do that through a series of regular meetings where we discuss concerns and ideas, all focusing on driving the business forward, all focusing on the success of the organisation and the success of everybody in this room, the organisation's people, our customers, our employers, clients, whatever we choose to call them. So essentially, as chairman, it's my role to ensure that all of the activities of the board of directors are purposeful and effective. And then there is also sort of my favourite part of the role, which is acting as an ambassador for Activate Enterprise, acting as an ambassador with all of the stakeholders that Activate Enterprise's activities touch upon. The board of directors more widely, which is sort of primarily responsible for developing the organisation's strategic objectives and the policies of the organisation, and then monitoring our progress towards achieving those. We're also responsible for appointing senior management and for accounting to all of our stakeholders for the organisation's activities and also the organisation's results. Amongst our legal obligations as a board, and I think it might sound like really common sense, but I often remind people of this when I'm talking to people who are directors on boards of companies. It's so important to come back to the basics very often. And as directors, we have legal obligations. We are legally obliged to promote the success of the company. That's our number one legal obligation as a director, and that's really fundamental and important. We are legally required to exercise independent judgment. That's our own independent judgment as people on the board, and to exercise reasonable care, skill, and diligence in all that we do when we're operating in our capacity as board members for Activate Enterprise. And of course, the board of directors is where the buck finally stops. And so, as you would quite rightly expect, our guiding principles are those that have been given to us by you of integrity and agility. So finally, I'd like to spend just a few minutes talking about Activate Enterprise's vision and our future and our strengths and our opportunities. And I think when you sort of look at our operation and the marketplace in which we operate, I think it is actually very easy to begin to spot all of the very exciting opportunities that we face. We've got the educational integrity of Activate learning as part of our DNA, which I think is really fundamental, and Sally has talked about that a little bit this morning and what that really means for us. We might not be the biggest, but we do have scale. We've got scale, we've got track record, and we've got, as a result of those things, we do have credibility, which I think is so critically important when you're going out to employers, especially. We've clearly got strong values, there's no doubt about that, and consistent behaviours, and we can prove our commitment to the wider community, which again is something which a lot of organisations, employers, companies can sometimes struggle to do. But we've got no difficulty doing that. We really can demonstrate our commitment to the wider community. So that's a great asset as well, and a huge strength. And we're resilient, and we can demonstrate that we're in it for the long run. And I think all of that really sort of wraps up as saying that we truly are a sustainable social business. And these are the sorts of businesses that have got the greatest opportunities ahead of them in this current day and age. And that really is a very firmly held belief that I have. On top of all that, we're a regional leader. We already dominate the Thames Valley. We've got fantastic long-term partnerships with Activate colleges and with a growing list of others as well. We've got strong leadership, of course, and the most enviable workforce in the industry, you know. So really, when you take all of that together and then add in that other ingredient that we mustn't lose sight of, we've got 1,300 employers as clients and potential clients who we can cross-sell to. So we are, as Mike Jennings, a previous guest speaker, would say, definitely a force of attraction as an organisation. So I put it to you today, and it is a challenge, if you like. How can we become more agile? How can we become more commercially minded? How can we be more switched on to what our customers really want and need? And how can we build better relationships and become really, truly well connected? And importantly, how can we advance our capacity and capabilities for quality delivery in what will be, as Sally alluded to, increasingly flexible ways? Well, for starters, and it's a big question, it's a really big question. The answer is in this room. I would encourage each and every one of you, I think, to spend time assessing your skills and the things that you are good at, the achievements that you've had, the things that you do well. I'd really encourage you to spend time thinking about that and then telling the world about it. I mean, literally, put them on LinkedIn. You know, let your colleagues know, let our clients know the things that you are really, really good at. But also, ask the right questions. which I think is so important. You need to challenge yourselves and challenge others to find the gaps. And you need to be really, really firm about it. Find the gaps. You need to go out and look at our competitors and see, well, what are our competitors doing well? And then when we know what some of those gaps are, when each one of you has identified some of your own and some of your colleagues and the organisation as a whole, then we all need to start doing things that might frighten us a little bit, but we all need to then start doing things that will begin to fill in those gaps. And really, I think that's one of the most powerful ways, as a group of people all working together, trying to get stuff done. That, for me, is one of the most powerful ways of achieving, supersonic change. I just think it's such a valuable process to go through. So I encourage all of you, I challenge all of you to do that. And I guess, again, it feeds into something that Sally was talking about. I said there were quite a few parallels in themes. In my own experience, the learning colleagues are the very, very best colleagues. These are the people who can just stand up and say, I don't know. They can stand up and say, I need help with that. Or they can say, oh, sorry, my bad, I got that wrong. And they're also the people who are there when you really, really need them. And they are the people who will give off the right signals to our clients and our potential clients. So in beginning, just to sum up those few words that I've shared with you, I think it has to be recognised that we are on a long journey. But critically, we know where we are going, and we know why we're going there. We definitely know that there will be short-term pressures in achieving that, in getting to our destination, and there are going to be plenty of bumps along the way. But it is when the pressure is on, I think, that our core guiding principles, integrity and agility, become the most important things to us. There's no doubt at all in my mind, and I've been involved with Activate for some time, and seeing how Activate Enterprise is already developing, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind at all that this organisation, the Activate Enterprise, has got what it takes to succeed in what is an exciting and growing marketplace. There's no doubt about it. Right, so that's really about all I wanted to say to you this morning, except that I would like to thank you very much for listening to me, saying a few words. What I'd really like to do, though, is to thank each and every one of you here today. Thank you for embracing and committing to this exciting Activate Enterprise business adventure. Thank you for creating our guiding principles of integrity and agility. And thank you for coming to work every day, growing people, growing business. Thank you, and I hope you have a really fun, enjoyable team day. Thank you very much.